I'll quote the BBC headline 2 months ago was, "Why do our employees smuggle AI into the business?" And the first paragraph is, "It's easier to just do it and then ask for forgiveness if you get caught or if you get in trouble." There's one side of the business that tells everyone, test as much as you can, experiment as much as you can, find new technologies that are going to make it better. And there's the other side of the business that needs to own the risk around it. Visibility doesn't naturally exist if you don't proactively get it. And with SaaS, you can either go around the business and ask people what they're using. Even then, you'll get a worse list than if you use an automated tool. It's not about the feedback itself. I think when things are definitive, very hard feedback or very good feedback, they sound the same in both cultures. Sometimes we have to give up on the quality of the wording, the design, the pace of reach outs and all of those other things in order to get things done. I'm okay with people not doing perfect things, but I'm not okay with people not investing hard in what they're doing.
Lior is the co-founder and CEO of Grip Security, an innovative Israeli cybersecurity startup dedicated to securing the sprawling world of software as a service, SaaS, applications. Under Lior's leadership, Grip Security empowers organizations to discover, monitor, and protect every SaaS platform in use, making it possible to maintain robust visibility and control over business-critical data. His passion for practical, forward-thinking security solutions drives Grip's success in addressing the evolving SaaS threat landscape, positioning both him and his company at the forefront of the cybersecurity industry. Lior, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. I'm happy to be here today.
Awesome. I've been looking forward to this quite a bit because I know your space somewhat from the last company that I was at.
Yeah.
And I love your guys' novel approach to cybersecurity. I think it's a very clever and smart way that you're going about it. For our listeners, in your own words, could you describe what Grip Security does?
Yeah, definitely. And I'll start with why we do what we do.
Please.
So we're a SaaS security company. We're the fastest growing SaaS security startup. But we live in a world today where it's literally impossible to buy software that's not SaaS. Like no one sells on-prem anymore. And while there may be, there's one-off exceptions, if you look at the average employee, the average business unit within an organization, they almost completely have moved to SaaS applications. Mm-hmm. And if they haven't done it yet, when they need to either upgrade their infrastructure, bring a new solution in, start using AI to do what they do, all of those are going to be in SaaS. So the longer we wait, the more apps we're going to have. And we're seeing the world going through kind of a hyper specialization motion. So instead of having one big app that does everything for us like we used to when everything was on-prem, when bringing technology was hard, today when the adoption of technology is so easy, basically the barrier is a sign-up form, every 2 people in the company can use their own system to do a very specific job, hyper specialization. So in a world like that, SaaS just breaks how we used to do security. We used to have our data in the center and build walls around it to prevent it from going out. When you use a SaaS application, almost by default, the first thing you do is take corporate data and send it to a third party on the internet. So all of this infrastructure that used to secure a company just doesn't apply to SaaS applications the same way, and they need new technology in order to do the exact same thing just for SaaS, because SaaS breaks our identity management, it breaks our configuration management, or governance, or compliance. And what Grip is doing is bringing those capabilities that were lost when we moved to SaaS back to the security team. And we do it in innovative ways and clever technologies. We take the opportunity to modernize how we govern as well. But in essence, complete visibility, applying governance, managing misconfigurations, and managing user life cycles.
And maybe starting with just the visibility portion, your approach to finding this visibility is different from other companies. And it's a hard problem to find the visibility because, as you mentioned, I can use a credit card or something to start and sometimes IT and security doesn't have overview of this. How do you go about the discovery piece?
It's funny because often what CISOs would say, you cannot buy something in my company without getting my approval for it,
I've heard
which
that.
is true. But then they forget that it used to be physically impossible to deploy new software without them. They used to own the server room. Now that they don't, maybe they own the financial signature, but it means a few things. One, by the time they're asked whether it's approved or not, the business has already made a decision. They've
Right.
tested 5 tools, they chose one, they ran through the product and the content and everything, and now security is more of a rubber stamp, because the next question I always ask is, well, how often did you say no? And then they don't have a firm answer. Usually it's once or twice a year. The way we look at visibility needs to start from day one, because security needs to be involved in the business. In order to be involved from day one, you need to immediately know when someone signs up. And historically, the way it's being done is either by looking at the network, which is extremely noisy, or looking at invoices, which are extremely accurate, but you only get them 60 days after you've already purchased the tool. It's a bit too late, and you also don't get the users behind them. An invoice maybe has a number of seats, but it doesn't have the name of the people that are using the tool itself. So again, looking at an identity-centric approach to it, the one connective tissue between a SaaS identity and a SaaS app is email. We all know we sign up to an application and get a welcome email, a password reset, a billing notification, all of those robot-generated email interactions between a user and an app, which lets us as a vendor, we have an NLP model, natural language processing, deploy it on the email server of the organization, and can instantly understand. We go back 2 years and can instantly find every application that was in use and continuously find new things as they come in. So the next time someone signs up to Dropbox, Marketo, Smartsheets, we can find it right away. And then we can do amazing things with it, understand who the admin is, when do people log in and sign up. We can automatically revoke their access. There's a lot of other things you're able to do once you get this visibility.
Interesting. And you mentioned this actually already, which was that as now that everything is in SaaS, your email, or rather your information in your SaaS inside of your company, is immediately going to whatever SaaS platform you're working with. And for you and for me, partly it's like pretty obvious. Okay, you need to secure your SaaS environment. But for those listening, like, can you explain the vulnerability that using SaaS builds is in an enterprise? Why is it so vulnerable?
SaaS is not more vulnerable than your average app.
Mhm.
It's just placed out in the street. It's accessible to anyone from everywhere. So if you think of having a safe in your house, if you take the same safe and put it out, there's definitely new risks that are being introduced around it.
Interesting.
So, kind of the simplest example, we used to have physical offboarding measure where someone leaves the network, they lose access not to the apps themselves. Even if you forgot to revoke their access one by one from all of your business apps, they lose access to the network, and by that lose access to all of your apps. When you think of SaaS, it's not the same case. So someone leaves the business, and let's say they had 15 users, you've only removed 7 out of the 15 because you have SSO, because you did it manually, maybe you have a massive Excel sheet. Those other 8 apps that are left, as long as the user remembers the passwords, they can log back in and access the data. It happened to Block in 2021.
Hmm.
8.2 million data points lost for employees. Just an employee logging back into the same system they used every day. It happened to Disney twice in the last 4 months. Once, someone going back to an AI app. Second time was one of the employees logging back to the menu management system, changing the allergy definitions for all of the meals in the park. So
That's terrible.
it's kind of this kind of problem couldn't exist without SaaS. That's one. The second part of the challenge is the way those apps come into the business makes it hard to apply governance, because often those apps are not supporting our controls like SSO or IGA. because we always have this stream of applications that come in often faster than what our security team can handle. And you end up with a growing queue of things you need to do. You need an automated system to help define the processes and the challenges behind it. And I'll give one last example.
Please.
SaaS is managed by the business. In every company, the VP of marketing would manage SalesLoft and Marketo. The VP of sales would manage, I don't know, smart sheets for account tracking, or Clary for Salesforce analysis. Engineers manage Datadog, but those people are not security experts, and they don't know what's the best security configuration for those apps. They don't know how to make the application secure. You need a tool that has best practices and can help extend to the security team to be the local partner of those people as they manage the app. Again, not to block them, to help them.
I really like this analogy of you're putting the safe, it's still a safe, it's still hard to get in, but you're putting it in the middle of the street, introducing new vulnerabilities. It's an interesting metaphor for SaaS applications in the new world versus the old world. What are the challenges around understanding the sprawling SaaS landscape? It's well known that, like you mentioned, the line of business is using many applications, many SaaS applications. They're only growing. There's more tools coming out, AI tools, all kinds of things. And every day it feels like there's a new SaaS application that I want to use, that the enterprise wants to use, that our employees want to use. Why is it so hard to get a list?
I'll quote the BBC headline 2 months ago was, "Why do our employees smuggle AI into the business?" And the first
That's really
quote
good.
in the first paragraph is, "It's easier to just do it and then ask for forgiveness if you get caught or if you get in trouble." AI is a wonderful example. There's thousands of AI startups founded in the US. All of them are 5 to 2 years old. They don't have security controls. They market directly to the user. And those applications, specifically all SaaS apps, it's username and password. You create a user, you collaborate over the app itself as a team. There's currently a conflict in the business where the board, the COO, the CEO go around and tell everyone, if you don't use SaaS, we're going to stay behind. Use SaaS as much as you can. MuleSoft CEO just this week told all the employees that if they're going to add AI usage as part of the yearly evaluation. So if you cannot use AI, you're not going to get promoted. You're potentially going to get fired. You're not going to get your bonus because it's part of every yearly HR evaluation, which I think is amazing. But I don't think they consulted with the CISO before making this decision.
That's a great point.
And it creates tension in the business. There's one side of the business that tells everyone, test as much as you can, experiment as much as you can, find new technologies that are going to make you better. And there's the other side of the business that needs to own the risk around it. So with this tension comes Spawn, because our average employee doesn't understand what the meaning is of bringing a new third-party vendor. They don't understand they need to report that, and no matter how much we're going to train them, I'm telling CISOs often, your average security analyst, engineer doesn't know the policy around marketing use of the company logo.
Yes.
The marketing team understanding of how SaaS onboarding should look like is around the same. So users try to do good, but in a way, they introduce new risks. They're not security experts. They don't understand the risk. And it's our responsibility as a security team to help them do it safely. And this is where you need visibility. The visibility doesn't naturally exist if you don't proactively get it. And with SaaS, you can either go around the business and ask people what they're using. Even then, you'll get a worse list than if you use an automated tool.
And there's no way to keep line of business or even individual employees from using tools that they see pop up, or to take it all from what they call the service catalog or something like that.
I'll give you an example, real story. So when we founded the company, 3 weeks in, we had 7 employees overall, 3 founders, 4 engineers. We had the first POC of the product. Dan, our CTO, comes to my office and he says, we had an Excel sheet with all of the apps, all of the things that we bought, and we had the output of the first visibility, first run. He said, Lior, it's going to work, but we have a bug. It says on this list that you're using Dropbox, and it's not on the approved list. And I said, oh, that's right. Our lawyers asked us to use Dropbox, so I created an account. It wasn't a false positive, but our first shadow app was 3 weeks in. I created it, and it was Dropbox.
Wow.
So even in a company that exists for 3 weeks and have 7 employees, you have shadow applications. It's not as easy to manage. Now imagine what happens when you have 7,000 or 70,000.
Yeah, there's just no way around the sprawl. It's not like the good old days where you had access to the server room, like you said, and you were putting the CD in the drive and,
Yeah.
Windows
You had a finite
Server
amount of
2003.
servers. You had to choose between what you want to deploy.
That's right. And there was obviously so much less technology as well. So there's nothing you can do about it. So that's the world we live in today. What is the tell me a little bit about like what's the next step if you're a CISO, if you're looking at or you're in the IT organization as a whole and you're looking at a way to solve this problem. What are your options? Like how do you do this without grip, or is it even possible to do this without grip?
I don't want to be the guy that says it's impossible without grip. I think grips significantly helps, and I think it's going to be wasteful to do it without us. But there's a way to do it. Oh, there's a scale between the complete Wild West and your perfect SaaS security program.
Hmm.
And while SaaS is new, or the SaaS problem is new, most security teams don't have experience solving the SaaS problem. They've never done it before in their previous job. Part of our kind of advantage as a company is that we've done it hundreds of times. We know how to help you build a SaaS program. Just having tech on is not always enough. It helps a lot, but you need to change your practices and the things that you do on a day-to-day basis. If I have recommendations, the most important one is the easiest one. Always pursue SSO when you can.
Okay.
It's different than what companies would say, which is in my company you cannot bring things in if they don't support SSO, because in reality the world acts differently.
Hmm.
It could be that the apps are owned by a third party, by a customer we're working with, and we have to gain access because it's a business decision.
Sure.
It could be that the apps itself has an SSO tax. You cannot get SSO if you don't upgrade your license, and then no one's going to pay $100,000 just for an upgrade you don't need for SSO. So when it's a good recommendation because SSO is great. Second is don't deactivate sign in with Google, especially for companies who use Google,
Hmm.
because it gives you a false sense of security. When sign in with Google is active, it's much more easier for people to sign in. But the advantage is there's no password, there's one offboarding that's centralized, and that you have visibility to what they're signing up for. When you disable it, you're like, oh, now they cannot do it anymore. But realistically, it just means they're using a username and password.
That's a
They're
great point.
still logging in, but you lost visibility. Which leads to kind of the third thing: get a password manager. If you don't assume everything is behind SSO, then passwords are a problem. And a password manager, especially an enterprise one, can help reduce the password risk of SaaS, duplicative passwords, credential stuffing, reuse. Having it in an enterprise vault would help theoretically increase the chances users are going to forget their password when they leave, because they have hard passwords, non-duplicative, saved in a vault that they lose access to. It's not always true, but it's sometimes true. And then lastly is run periodical configuration management. So for the top apps that you own, you need to log in and see that no one changed things that shouldn't have been changed. What happens, we see it with Salesforce all the time. There's a configuration that says, enforced all users to use phishing resisting MFA. And then you bring in this one consultant that couldn't log in because of the MFA, and some admin, because it's urgent, removes it for a day or two and forget to change it again.
And now multi-factor authentication is turned off.
Yeah, now
And
it's turned off for everyone. Um, Same with file sharing, same with other things. You cannot assume it stays the same. There's drift over time. So periodically, have a security expert take a look at that.
I actually think that's really good hygiene, just to say, use SSO, be realistic about it. Not everything's going to have SSO. I mean, it's such a easy posture to take, but I agree with you. I don't want to say lazy, but it's too easy. It's too simple to say everything's going to go through SSO. So I think that's a very good point. I love what you're saying around Google one-click sign-in. It's an interesting point to say, look, you're not really worried about the password at all in that case. So don't see it as a threat, see it as a positive, and on the back end, you get a better idea of what is connected to your Google services. And the password manager one is also a really interesting one because it's almost a fallback on what is an SSO. You have these complex passwords, people can't remember them when they leave, like you were mentioning at Block. I think somebody went back into the AWS system even because they remember their passwords. So these are really, really good hygiene things. But Grip makes all of this 1,000 times easier because there's still, with everything you mentioned, a whole world that you're not tackling, which is I signed up for something. I didn't tell anyone about it. The password manager doesn't make a difference. SSO doesn't know about it. I didn't use Google.
Yeah.
There's a whole world of that.
Yeah, and password is just one element of it. And when you think of how SaaS are getting breached, it's misconfigurations. Password breaches are still over 60% of all of the breaches we see around the world. Phishing, we tend to forget, but like half of phishing is still password based. Just enter your password to the wrong place, or that someone tricks you into giving your password. So phishing is a password problem, and passwords are used for SaaS. The more you decrease the password risk surface, the better your SaaS are. But there's other problems with SaaS. There's supply chain problems. Oracle Cloud was breached last week.
Yeah, I heard
They
about that.
denied the breach for
I read about that too.
they acknowledged it.
Yeah.
But we knew from day one that the breach was real. Why did we know that? Because we looked at the list of companies that the attacker published, and we checked for each one of them that we know if they have Oracle or not. The answer was always yes. The companies that didn't have Oracle weren't on the list. So we knew that at least there's a chance that something happened there, and we were able to alert our customers that maybe haven't heard of the Oracle breach or didn't know they had an Oracle environment. We can tell them who are the users, who's the admin, rotate their password automatically so they wouldn't be affected by a potential password breach, and then help them enforce MFA continuously or SSO. So, even for your approved application, things can happen to them, and you need to know about it. We all assume we're going to know when there's a breach for one of our vendors, but I can name the companies that got breached. Even recently, if I open that, we're not as familiar. Like, do you know Deep Code was breached in 2023? 11% of companies have employees using Deep Code. I don't think the average CISO know this vendor exists or heard that they got popped. So Circle CI is
I
the
didn't
same.
know that.
Do people know that they're using Circle CI? Circle CI got breached. Ticketmaster got breached. Do you have any way of knowing which users have used the same password for Ticketmaster that leaked 100 million passwords and your average business application? Without a tool that gathers this visibility, monitors for this, and help you remediate it, like even after the breach itself, you need to remediate. Even if the app is approved, the remediation process is hard. So without a tool that helps you do it, a platform that helps you do it, it becomes incredibly complex.
Okay, so we spent the first 20 minutes now talking about just the visibility part, which
Yeah.
is so important to get right. But you're getting to the next part, which is arguably even the more important part, which is then what?
Yeah.
workflow. You mentioned remediation. Can you explain to our listeners and to me how Grip does the remediation and the workflow part, and why it's important too, if you don't mind?
Yeah, definitely. I'll start by saying any good program scales with visibility, but visibility by itself creates problems, doesn't solve problems. Um,
True.
there's you cannot scale to the size of the problem if you don't have automated visibility, which is why it's where we start. But then our visibility powers the business workflows, configuration management, breach remediation, identity workflows. All of those are based on our ability to know when things happen so that then we can react.
Hmm.
Um, we've mentioned briefly breach remediation. What happens when either your app is breached or when your users are breached? If we talked about an app, so let's talk about the user. What happens if one of your users accidentally falls into a phishing attack and send their password to a malicious website? Um, what most people would do is tell you rotate the password for that website, which is easy, but realistically, the same username and password could be used at other websites. So you can either go one by one and rotate passwords for all of them, or use Drip to automatically rotate passwords for every password-based account. We have some cool tech to do that without being integrated to the application itself, so we can help remediate. Um, when thinking of the challenges that SaaS introduced, we talked about risk, but then there's just manual work behind managing SaaS um, that is clogging the security team. Um, for example, we've mentioned security reviews for vendors.
Hmm.
If we do them too late, it's a problem. One of the things we offer with Grip is we have like a drag and drop automation workflow engine. So one of the default ones is application onboarding. When a new app comes in, if the app, let's say, handles PHI, if you're a hospital, then send a security questionnaire for the user on why they're using the app. You can start answering those questions before you make a decision. Block it on the network until it's approved. Send a note to the PHI handling committee. Make sure we have a BAA because it's a PHI app. Like run all of those processes that would otherwise be handled manually in the context of SaaS. And the pace and the size and the number of apps that are being onboarded are just impossible to do manually. You either do them for the things you know, for the things your boss asks you to do, or not do them at all. So most of our focus as a business is not on the visibility. We're known for visibility, but people buy for visibility and stay for automation.
Well, it's what you
We have a
said.
T-shirt that says that.
Actually, that's really great. If, next time I see you, I'm going to see if you have one in my size because that's a great quote. Because what it highlights is that, and I'm paraphrasing exactly what you said, which is that once you understand and have visibility into what the problem is, it doesn't actually solve anything. You need to automate some of the work that comes with it. One of the things that I saw your product do that I thought was pretty cool is if it's not already known and poses some kind of threat risk, you can actually go through the forgot password link that would be in the email
Yeah,
and revoke access. Is that right?
it's that right. We have two patents for that as well.
That's a
Um,
really cool one.
yeah. So the challenge we wanted to solve is getting out of the API race.
Okay.
Um,
Explain that.
there's 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 a number of vendors that manage onboarding and offboarding from SaaS apps by integrating to the app.
Hmm.
And then when someone leaves, they get a note and they call the remove user, delete user API and um, delete it. The challenge it it has is that one, you're now dependent on the vendor having an API connector.
And that
And
specific API
that specific API,
connector.
those APIs change. You need to maintain them all the time. And
Fair.
maybe they've built 200 or 400 or 1,000 of those. There's 70,000 apps out there.
Okay.
Many of those apps, again, if you already connected the API, just connect SSO on the way. It's the same pricing tier, it's the same admin, and it solves most of the security problems. Centralized offboarding, like there's no additional security value in offboarding via API. The second challenge is that most of those apps don't have an API to do that, or that the security team doesn't have access to it, or alternatively, just connecting 1,000 APIs takes 2.5 years. Like even
Yeah.
if you do one every day, it's going to take you with business days 4 years to finish, and by the end of those 4 years, there's going to be 2,000 new apps in the business. So we needed to build a unified offboarding mechanism that would help our customers revoke access so you wouldn't end up like Disney, but do it in a way that works from day one. So you deploy grip and instantly works for all thousands of applications that are being used. And the one common capability that all or most SaaS have is an email native password rotation flow. You enter your email, you get a change your password kind of note, click a link, change your password. And because the visibility engine already is based and can find password rotation emails, we were then able to use RPA, robotic process automation, to invoke that so that we can unanimously change passwords across all of the apps that we know. In an offboarding scenario, we can lock the users out of the system. In a breach remediation scenario, we can enforce password rotation. In a password management scenario, we can rotate those and send them into the password manager. But all of those use cases allow us to basically support thousands of or tens of thousands of apps from day one. And it's pretty cool tech. So it's one of the coolest things that we do.
It is really cool tech. And I'm obviously a big fan of what you guys are doing.
Thank
I
you.
love your approach about it. I think the workflow engine is fantastic. And it's clear you guys are seeing the growth that is well deserved because the value that you're bringing to CISOs, IT teams, all across the nation, all across the world. And speaking of the nation, there's a lot of great companies that have come out of Israel. You guys are one of them. Tell me a little bit about being an entrepreneur from Israel, coming to the United States, being a founder. If you don't mind shifting gears a little bit into how you started the company and also why you're now here in this side of the world.
Oh, that's a bunch of different topics. So if I haven't introduced myself earlier, I founded Drip 4 years ago, and I moved to the US. I'm based in Boston those days. About 2 years ago.
Hmm.
So half of the time the company existed, and that was about a year after we raised our A round. So we were about 40 people in the company back then. We're now well over 100. I'll start with the last question, why I moved to the US.
Yeah,
There's a lot of good technologies in Israel, and they end up selling mostly in the US. The US is an amazing market for startups. It's unanimous. Everyone speaks the same language.
yep,
There's a culture of buying tech to solve problems, which doesn't apply in many other places.
that's true.
In Germany, they write documents to solve problems before they buy technology. And it allows you to scale to a very good size until you need to do things differently. What you see is many founders at some point move to the US because this is where the market is. And I'll share my personal experience.
Please
Um,
do.
when you build a company in Israel, your assumption is that you're going to move, you're going to work in a US time zone most of the time, or at least you're also going to work on US time zone. So you
Both,
get to the
both.
office at 9 or 10 every morning, and people wake up on the East Coast at 3 p.m. Tel Aviv time, and or at 6 p.m. West Coast time.
Hmm.
Or 6 they wake up at I'll re-say it just for the editing. So when you build a company in Israel, people assume you're going to work U.S. time or also going to work U.S. time. So you get to the office at 9 or 10 a.m. and people wake up on the East Coast at 3 p.m. and wake up on the West Coast at 6 p.m. It becomes hard to leave the office early. So on the first few days, calls in at, let's say, 7 or 8 p.m. And then you hire your first sales team. So you stay until 8 or 9. And then there's resellers and past partners and investors, and the team gets bigger. And at some point, leaving the office between 11 and 12 becomes really hard. At 12 p.m. Israel, 12 a.m. Israel is what, 2 p.m. West Coast, so 6 more or 4 more hours to work. And it's tiring. You kind of become a zombie over time, going to the office, from the office to bed, and from bed to the office. The second thing is it prohibits you from meeting people face to face and being spontaneous. Um, I have now the pleasure of jumping on a plane in the morning, doing a lunch in Cincinnati, a dinner in Chicago, and being back home before the day is over. You cannot do that when everything is 12 hours or more away. So when the company scales, it becomes essential first for my personal life, and then for the company that I'll be here in the US. And I'm super happy that we moved. It allowed me to sync my working day with what matters most, which is our customers, our team here in the US, our partners. Um, and second, it provides opportunity that wouldn't have existed if I was in Israel, around funding, around the ISV partnerships or channel partnerships, closing deals. One of the biggest deals we closed in the last quarter was here in New Jersey, and they needed me to fly in um, with a 5 hour notice. You just cannot do that when you're so far away.
So it really felt like for the go to market and it's crazy to think that you guys have only been around for 4 years, but in order to scale the business, you had to be where the customers are, where the partners are.
Yeah, I
And
cannot see how you do that otherwise.
it makes complete sense. But a large part of your development team is still in Tel Aviv.
Hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about what it's like to work with a team that's in a time zone that far away and the challenges with now that you're here, still having to manage the team over there? What advice do you have for people who have a team in Tel Aviv or Europe or anywhere else?
So, no, first I'll say I'm not sure I'm the right person to ask, because I was
Okay.
born into it. I was managing the Israeli office when I was there, um, and I kind of done it by default. I think it would be interesting if you ask a US team what's the difference between working with engineers here and there. What I think they're going to say are very positive things, because sometimes there's a problem. Sometimes there's a bug. And it's 2 a.m. in Israel and no one can solve it. You need to wait for the morning. It's not very fun. Maybe the Israeli holidays around October um, are definitely problematic for a US seller when 50, 60, 70% of the team is on vacation. But the Israeli mentality is where we need to prove ourselves as top tier time and time again, and prove ourselves as a reliable tech hub, which means things cannot fall through because we're so far away. We,
Mhm.
as me as an Israeli, and us as a company that has a business center in the US, or a technology business center in the US and technology center in Israel. And if the Israeli tech prevails and delivers, um, we do that whether if it's Israel weekend, like a Friday, and no one's in the office and we're urgently needed. My engineers are working at a pace that I don't think everyone has seen before in terms of their ability to release features. And also, there's an interest in involvement where the engineering team is highly interested in providing impact, seeing customers are happy. So they would join calls at the middle of the night. They would build things over the weekend to make them work. And there's challenges sometime, but I think overall we're very privileged to have the team that we have, and people would compensate on any, I'll say, physical challenge or time zone challenge just by adapting very well.
So you're
And I think
saying
it's,
there's, sorry to interrupt you, but
yeah.
just to iterate what you're saying, because I think it's really important, is you have a definite culture in the United States, which I want to ask you about in a second. When you mentioned around startup being able to sell into the enterprise, I mean that is a cultural thing, very different from Germany, where I spent most of my childhood, and I'm very aware of some of the cultural differences when it comes to buying software in that market, which is um, distinctly different from the United States. But you're also making the point that the Israeli development team, and maybe specifically your development team, and the culture in both Tel Aviv as a whole, but inside of your company is very strong, which allows you to have this time zone difference, but still produce high quality code at high quality products at a high velocity.
Yeah. And I'd even say specifically, European development companies or European tech companies,
Mm-hmm.
when they start in the first few years, they sell in Europe. Israeli companies sell in the US. So the culture, the process, everything is geared towards supporting a US sales team with a big time zone difference. When you think of how you can rely on engineers in Israel versus engineers in East Europe, as an example, who are great, they're phenomenal technical engineers. Israel needs to deliver and it needs to prove itself, so we can stay a leading tech hub. So, the team is doing what's needed to make it happen.
Well, I'll say from my personal experience, I built my last company, and even previously when I was working um, at large organizations, I was working with Eastern European developers. And I think similar to the Israeli mindset, there is a need to prove yourself, a
Yeah.
hunger, a desire to succeed. The thing that stood out to me most when you were telling your story is those 2 a.m., 3 a.m. Tel Aviv time, or in our case, in Eastern Europe time, where code was still getting delivered, things were getting shipped, customers had issues, and it is clearly the middle of the night wherever the development team is. And there is no good reason other than being a great team member, wanting to deliver, wanting to be successful, having that fire in your belly, and wanting to succeed that is driving you to be there. The throughput that I saw, and again, I think it's a broader strokes thing. It could have just been my team the way it's your team,
No,
but
I would assume it's the culture.
I think it is. And they were willing to do it in a way that not everybody is. And so I'm going to ask you the provocative question: how do you find the U.S. working culture?
I have good things to say about the US working culture.
You
Bad
better.
things to say about the Gen Z working culture. So the US, Israel is good at building startups. The US is good at building companies,
Well said.
public
I love
companies.
that. That's a snippet right
There's
there. That's
things
really
that
good.
are an advantage when you're small and are a disadvantage when you're big. Um, and yeah, we're even seeing this with Grip. The way we've done sales when the company was smaller was great, and it could have never worked, um, the size we are now. Um,
Interesting.
so I don't know if the US culture is different than the Grip culture. The people I work with in Grip in the US are phenomenal. I'm super proud of the interpersonal relationship you were able to build with a company that's mostly remote. Um, for me, Israel office is in the office 4 or 5 days a week.
Mhm.
Everyone's together all the time, and building those kind of relationships with a team that's, you know, there's, most of the people haven't met most of the people face to face in the U.S. office.
Really?
So yeah, well, everyone works remotely. We have an office here in Boston, but there's a quarter of the team that works from here. We often meet at QBRs, but there's different teams. We don't bring
Yes.
the entire company to a QBR or an SKO.
Right.
So when we think of the differences, I think we're not an Israeli company, we're an international company.
I love that.
And while every office or region has their own elements of the culture that are different, there's a very big center around that we're able to create around involvement, responsibility, being fun to work with, and having a no jerk mentality that we're able to build, that I think is phenomenal. I enjoy working here in the US. It's for me, it's super fun. I like the people. I like the conversations. There's those differences. They exist. There's the more sensitivity around controversial topics in Israel. Everything's open. There's um, bad information is more hinted versus direct.
Yes.
Um, Feedback is being delivered differently. The way you run conversation takes time to get used to. And it even said, for me as someone who moved to the US, it when you can speak the language, um, and my English was okay, pretty good when I moved here. Um, there's still a cultural gap between speaking and having a conversation. Takes 2 years to become funny again. You feel like an idiot every time you have a conversation when you come in as an immigrant, like you cannot express yourself the right way. So I think the biggest challenge people who work internationally have is not necessarily the cultural gap itself. It's just not being able to express themselves as they want. Being fun is hard. Being funny is harder. Um, Being friendly is hard. So it takes time to adapt to. And most people, unlike me, don't spend 95% of their day with calls in the US. They come in, being airdropped from time to time into a conversation in English, which they start with a disadvantage.
That's a really interesting point. A few things that stand out to me that I just wanted to highlight is one is the American talent pool is incredible, both on the engineering side and on the business side, but specifically the business side. I think for both of us who had teams that were remote, there is incredibly great talent in the United States
Yeah,
from both the technology and the business side. But there is a distinct difference, and I hear this from European founders all the time, in the way that you give feedback, in the way that you talk to your team, in the way that the interaction occurs. It's much less direct, it's much less upfront. And if you're not tuned into it as an immigrant or somebody that comes from a different place, it can be perceived as rude or crass or over demanding, when in reality, most likely you work with your team in a very direct, straightforward
you
way.
sound like my feedback form.
Well, even though, and I'll say this, you mentioned the language. I started learning English in, it was like eighth grade when I started speaking English. And I have worked hard not to sound like I started learning English more recently, but still from the cultural elements, even though it's been so long ago, 20 years, even though that's been the case, or 15 years, I'm still, admittedly, I still have this cultural barrier where I want to be direct and I have to stop myself, and have in the past been direct and had to stop myself and go, I got to find a smoother, more palatable, more American way to deliver what I'm about to say. And it's very hard. It's very hard if you're not from here.
Yeah, I had friends who send me draft emails asking like, how should I rephrase it to sound, say the exact same thing and sound more local, more polite. And it's hard to get used to, but it I don't think it's negative in any way. You just need to get accustomed to what people would expect you to say. Um,
Absolutely. Absolutely. And also vice versa, it can feel like, if you're coming from Europe or you're coming from a culture that's more direct, it can feel like you're not being completely transparent, or you're not being completely honest, or you're
yeah,
hiding something. And so it's a two-way street where you as a leader or somebody who's in that position can sometimes feel like the counterparty's not being straight up with me. They're not being straightforward with me. Well, the other counterparty can feel like, whoa, you're being too aggressive, too straightforward. And this dichotomy is it's real. A lot of people don't talk about it, but it's real.
Yeah.
I love that you mentioned that. What are some, and since we're on the topic, and I would benefit from this too, like what's some advice that you have to be more culturally appropriate when you're giving feedback to a team, or when you want to get something done, or you're coming over the top saying, we need to take this in a different direction or a different route? What is like something that I, as a you're foreigner, or anybody else as an immigrant, can go, okay, yeah, I got to learn to do this.
I would start with an indirect answer, which is more important for me.
Hmm.
There's within the team, there's different people who understand you differently and understand the gaps differently. The one thing that's most important for me, if I feel like I didn't hit the target, I call my employees and ask them like, "What do you think I should have done? Uh, what would you say? How would you phrase it?" It's just the fastest way to learn
I love
feedback.
that.
To learn, and I found myself multiple times calling someone and say, "Hey, I knew how I sounded like. Let me rephrase." Um, I think I insult it every time I write on Slack. I insult someone on a weekly basis. It's a constant thing I do. What I learned is that give them a call. It's like, hey, I just sent you a text. Realize it might sound wrong. Hear my voice when I say that it's going to sound different. Personally, I'm just very tactical. So I would write something like, your comment on the call didn't sound good. Should be better next time. You don't write something like that. In Israel, it would be fine. Even in Israel, people get shy about it. But we're in the middle of the call. I don't have time to give you the full uh, soft-handed story. Call back and fix it. And not everyone, I think, has the tendency to do so. That's what I would recommend. How to give feedback. There's enough, online guides to the sandwich method of giving feedback, and some being polite about it, being hinting, but there's often good reasons to be direct as well. So it's not about the feedback itself. I think people are when things are definitive, very hard feedback or very good feedback, they
It's
sound the
easier.
same in both cultures.
Hmm.
It's when, for example, you give someone feedback on a public call, where in some cultures it's considered humiliating. For example, in Singapore,
Hmm.
and in others it's standard.
Hmm.
Someone can get really offended by a very small comment on a very small thing because it was public and not because the comment itself was not okay. So those are the things you need to be aware of, not necessarily the definitive, like easy to spot kind of feedback sessions.
That's a great point. And it's just highlights the difference of like different cultures, different places, not just Israel, Europe, United States, but like you mentioned, very distinct cultures in Japan and Singapore, people that work with China. So there is that. Maybe last topic that I'd like to broach, which is being a founder, you care an immense amount about every little detail, or at least I did. And most of the founders that I interview, and most of the founders that are friends of mine, they are hyper obsessive about everything in their company. And it usually is at least a few people like that in the company that are like that. And then the company gets to a certain size, and of course you do your best to try to keep the culture of obsession with everything that happens as high as possible so that everybody feels the love and the joy of what you guys are doing. But it's not um, at the same level as the company gets bigger. At least that's what I've heard, and I understand, and I've even seen myself sometimes. What advice do you have for founders as they grow their company, as they grow themselves, as they grow their career? What's the right approach in instilling that love in the rest of the team, and also accepting that sometimes it's not going to match your own passion.
I still proofread all of our LinkedIn posts.
I understand.
I'm sure you understand,
I do.
but I, I get very extremes when it's public facing marketing. If 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 you don't, if you're not gonna care, then no one would care. Um, I think at the end of the day, the founder is in many cases the top most excited about a thing in the company. So if once you lower the bar, once you lower your excitement, you lower the bar. Um, and I still care immensely care about everything, about the exact wording um, that we say when we give people a job offer, about how we present grip in a demo. I have a filter on for our call recording tool because there's like one sentence that really bothers me that I want to make sure people are not saying. So I get an alert when they do. Every little detail, how our papers are designed, how many invites to follow our LinkedIn pages we send out every week. Like all of those small things are very important for me. Um, I did accept that sometimes I need to compromise. Like I used to, delete posts on our LinkedIn. I don't do that anymore, mostly, um, because one, there's many people who are better at their job than I am.
Mhm.
Um, Sometimes they do things in a way I disagree with, and ruining their flow is going to slow the company down. They're running as fast as they can, and they make deliberate decisions often to underinvest in things that they think are not important enough so they can do something else. What I care about mostly is the accumulative value and work that they did, not every specific detail. And I do believe that perfect is the enemy of done. Sometimes we have to give up on the quality of the wording, the design, the pace of reach outs, and all of those other things in order to get things done. Um, the totality of it still needs to be very, very high. So I'm okay with people not doing perfect things, but I'm not okay with people not investing hard in what they're doing, which are completely two different things. Um, so yeah, that's really my summary for it.
Can't tell you how much this resonates with me, and I completely understand where you're coming from about the LinkedIn posts or about making sure the messaging is right or making sure the size of the paper, the graphics, the email signatures, whatever. And
Yeah,
I think that oftentimes, especially when you're in the seat you're in now, actually goes underappreciated. Because what ends up happening is that you have team members internally go, oh, like he's maybe over emphasizing something, or people will say things like micromanaging. And my argument to them, and what I've heard many other successful founders like yourself and people say is, if not the founder, then who? And I think people don't necessarily understand that in order to get the company anywhere near where you have gotten it and to get it to the next level of where it's going to go, you absolutely have to have somebody who is obsessed with the company, who is obsessed with the specifics, who is obsessed with the details. And so I would go as far as to say that the company is incredibly lucky to have somebody who cares so deeply about the success of the business that he or she is willing to go the extra mile, whether it's taking action on their own to save it by deleting the LinkedIn post, or it's making sure that the feedback is heard in a way that is clear and concise. Not that we can't all improve, but that level of F's given is absolutely mandatory if you want to succeed as a business. In a big company, you don't need it. In a company that's small and wants to be big, it's an absolute necessity in the recipe. It's like flour in bread. You
yeah,
have to have it.
I agree.
Lior, thank you so much for spending time with us. Thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for your insight. Thank you for sharing all that information about Grip. I really appreciate it. I know our listener appreciate it, and I hope to have you on again soon.
Yeah, would love to. Thank you so much for having me. This was awesome.